Good morning. 1 year ago, when we met together in Nottingham, the focus of our national conference was Academy Trusts at the heart of their communities. Never did we for one moment know how defining a theme that would become in the 12 months that have since passed. I usually begin my speech this conference with some kind of quote or anecdote. This year, I simply want to begin by saying this: thank you. As Sarah has outlined, you have carried the enormous weight of responsibility over the last 6 months, not only with care, but with a determination to do what is right for your communities, almost always in very difficult and very uncertain circumstances. The stories from across our Trust Leaders network were not only of leaders and colleagues reassuring their communities, creating a sense of calm and stability through the chaos, but also of trusts and schools proactively organising food parcels and playing host to food banks, producing PPE for local NHS providers, supporting suppliers, those local employers, often the employers of parents who found themselves on the brink, and much more. It's been humbling and it's been inspiring. We have seen community-centred leadership at its very best. I also want to say thank you to your central teams, and we have a number of Chief Operating Officers from our national coup network joining us today. Central teams have led and worked behind the scenes to support trusts and schools to deliver, and have risen to the enormous challenges of recalibrating buildings, ensuring the IT delivers, putting in place unprecedented health and safety policy, communicating with parents and pupils on a daily basis, and ensuring staff and pupils have been safe, resourced, and equipped throughout. Where would the sector have been without these expert leaders by our side? And of course, a huge thank you to our teachers and support staff who have risen to the challenge of balancing keeping classes going in school whilst also providing that online learning too. As a parent myself, I've been at the front line of that, and I know the enormous amount of work and support that teachers have undertaken in order to make sure that we as parents are well equipped and ready to help our children learn. All of this against a background of uncertainty, challenge, and change in your own lives as well. As Sarah has said, a CEO's ability to rise to these enormous challenges professionally and to a degree personally depends not only on your inner well of determination, but just as importantly on the quality of the team around you. The importance of recruiting and investing in a great team, probably the most influential and defining aspect of the chief executive role, has never been more clear than through the crisis. As CEO of Forum Strategy, I can vouch for that too. Having the right team around me has made all the difference these past 6 months. So, where now? The answer cannot just be more of the same. You're doing what needs to be done, but you're also doing the incredibly demanding jobs you do because you want to achieve a legacy that is so much more than simply managing a pandemic, critical though that is. As one member of the Forum Strategy CEO network said to me at the start of term, I've now become comfortable with crisis management mode, perhaps too comfortable. I now want to rediscover the bigger picture. I want to get back to not only doing things that make a difference today, but set us up, our children and the trust itself, for all our tomorrows. I think that captures how many CEOs are feeling right now. We come together, colleagues, in this virtual setting after 6 months of relentless pressure, change, guidance, and uncertainty. It's hard to stop. It's hard to take time out to think, to spend at least a few hours above the business and the day-to-day realities of this situation, reacting and responding. But doing so matters. A recent paper by INSEAD found that well over 60% of CEOs are tending to focus on pressing issues, leaving strategy and institution building for better times. That's completely understandable, but it's a huge risk. We must remember that as human beings, each of us is sustained above all else by our sense of purpose and also our relationships with those around us. The sociologist and counsellor Dr. Steve Rose tells us that human beings are predominantly driven by the desire to fulfill the need for a sense of significance. This is achieved through a perceived sense of control over one's life, a sense of social belonging, and a sense of effective social contribution. Our system leaders have big hopes and aspirations, a desire to build and grow for the common good, but with that sense of control that Sarah talked about too. It's also what sustains organisations and ensures that they not only survive, but they thrive through times like this. We all owe it to this generation of children and young people, those at the heart of all we do, to ensure that they are a generation that thrives, not simply survives COVID-19 or its collateral. So that is why the theme of our conference this year is purpose and people. In 1980, management consultants Thomas Peters and Robert Waterman undertook an extensive analysis of the world's leading companies. The project showed more clearly than could have been hoped for that excellent companies were, above all, brilliant on the basics. These companies worked hard on keeping things simple in a complex world. They persisted. They insisted on top quality. They fawned on their customers, the people they serve. They listened to their employees and treated them like adults. They allowed their innovative product and service champions long tethers, allowing them to respond to the need for change and to create new solutions. They allowed some chaos in return for quick action and regular experimentation. I really like that book, and I particularly like that quote. I think it helps us to capture to a degree where we need to be right now going into this new year. Brilliance on the basics, fawning on our customers, those we serve, ensuring we put parents and children at the heart of what we do, listening to them, listening to and treating our employees well, and yes, using this situation to do things differently and to innovative in response to what they're telling us. The last few months have been all about reacting and managing complexity, uncertainty, and operating in territory we don't necessarily understand. A couple of months ago, I wrote a blog. 4 months or so into this crisis, simply reacting to events and managing them as well as we can do is not enough. CEOs and organisations that make the most of the hand they have been dealt will no longer begin to approach these events simply with a steady the ship approach. They will want to do much more. They will want to have the greatest impact possible whilst creating a lasting and positive legacy as we emerge. But they will need to do so in a world of so many unknowns. Rather than embarking on extensive strategic planning, what CEOs and executive teams can instead do is to first of all begin to reconnect with their purpose, their sense of intent. That is why I am encouraged that this half term we're hearing from many CEOs and boards across our network who are working to get back to basics, to reflect what really matters to them and what they want to do really well by revisiting their sense of purpose, by reconnecting with it. They are asking, what is the business we are really in amongst all of this? What are the basics we need to be good at? What do those we serve really need from us right now and in the months ahead, beyond the guidance from on high and the crisis management? What is the contextual wisdom really telling us? And from that, what are the small number of goals we are working towards in the year ahead? Yes, with some innovation and experimentation as we respond. I think being a strategic leader right now depends on two approaches. In the short to medium term, I think we need purposeful intent, deep awareness of the needs of our people that allows us to drive a small number of initiatives and priorities that quickly make a difference to them, with a dose of innovation, giving talented people within our organisations the freedom to move quickly and with purpose. Many CEOs speak of staff and pupil wellbeing initiatives, ensuring technology and online learning continues to be improved and refined in its early stages, and that catch-up programmes are impactful. These are initiatives with purpose and focus, not simply reactive to the guidance or to directives from government and officials. In terms of the medium to long term, and we can't lose sight of this, I think we need to be shaping and working towards a vision for a better, brighter, and yes, a slightly different future than the one we all thought we were heading towards. One that responds to the new world around us, the evolving needs of our communities, and the changing expectations of our workforce. That requires an even deeper and emerging conversation with those around us, our people. The shorter to medium term and the medium to longer term considerations are not necessarily exclusive here. And the real skill of CEOs will be ensuring they strike a balance and can focus on both, aligning them where possible. Some of the big themes that keep emerging are these: health and well-being, ensuring that our staff and pupils' well-being is at the fore. Technology and remote learning working. In the present, we've had to adapt very quickly to this, but it's also clear going into the medium to longer term that the way in which people work and the way in which children and young people learn is not necessarily just confined to sight. In fact, we enhance that learning experience and that love and that skill of learning by taking it away from the site as well as within the site. And certainly it prepares people and children for their adult lives and the way in which they will continue to learn and work in the years ahead. And of course, our staff want to do more around collaboration, planning, and working together to develop resources and materials away from site. Sustainability and the environment. This is probably the main issue for children and young people right now. This is their priority. The world in which they will grow into and live in and work in the future and raise their families is at risk. Now, of course, there are some short-term wins, again, that we can put in place, particularly around remote working, less travel, and being more energy efficient. But we've also got to think how our trusts and schools could be real beacons of sustainability as we move into the years ahead. Children and young people want their trusts, their schools, and their school leaders to be championing this cause and modelling it. Yet I think the education sector is still a long way behind. And then the evolution of the skills and the changing jobs market. We're preparing children and young people for a jobs market that looks very different, not only in the short term as our school leavers head into this new environment and the challenges it presents, but in the longer term as we see automation and the way in which some industries are completely undertaking a revolution right now. So these are all things that are taking place. They have immediate and long-term implications. The pandemic has only accelerated the need for strategy and solutions, and this goes beyond the pandemic. However, I am concerned, unlike in those organisations highlighted by Peters and Waterman, we are seeing leaders embark upon this year with a sense of the never-ending, desperately trying to prioritise purpose and people, but overwhelmed by the need to react to events, directives, and longer than average to-do lists. There's a need to rebalance from the reactive approach, important though that has been, and more towards the purposeful approach, purposeful intent. How do we reset the balance from reactive to purposeful? Well, reactive leadership comes from a different place than purposeful strategic leadership. In my book, Being the CEO, I talk about the dynamics that surround the chief executive, using the analogy of the generational farmer. There's the weather, the policy, the guidance, the compliance, the directives that come from government and its agencies. And of course, those events, those national events that are outside our control. The weather comes in and we have to respond. And there's been a lot of weather in the last year. Then there's the market, the evolving needs and expectations of those we serve, our communities, our pupils, the people at the heart of what we do. Now, where leaders have had time and space, this is where we've seen some of the most inspiring leadership over the past 6 months. But finding the time to move away from the weather and reacting to the weather to focus on that market has been really challenging. Yet it's there that our purpose emerges. Then there's the soil, the resources of the organisation and the people who help us respond to those needs and to help us grow organisations and trusts that make a difference with their talent, their skill. Teachers, leaders, those people in our central teams, people working together as a team to make a difference. And the family farm, the expectations and the framework of governance, ensuring that our values and vision remain constant over the medium and longer term. This year has been dominated by the weather. It's been relentless. We've been and we've had to quite literally stay indoors and take shelter. As a system, our focus has almost been entirely on the weather, reacting to our circumstances. But our purpose, as I've said, doesn't come from the weather. Our purpose comes from the market, the people we serve, and it's brought to life by the soil, the team and the resources around us. Today's conference is all about this, really developing as much as we can our connection and our reconnection with the market, and tending to the soil to shape organisations ready for the next stage. As Yusuf said in his opening speech this morning, purpose drives people and people drive purpose. That is why I'm delighted that at the heart of today's conference, we will be hearing from Mark Russell of the Children's Society, bringing us back to the people and the voices that matter most. The Children's Society's Good Childhood Report is probably the single most important piece of strategic intelligence that you as CEOs of Academy Trusts can have. Not the Ofsted Annual Report, not the government guidance on this or that. These are the weather. They have their place. I don't want to give too much away. This is not a spoiler. However, Mark has a very serious message for us. There is much to do. The UK is languishing in terms of children's life satisfaction and sense of purpose. This has been a trend that has continued for a number of years now, where our focus as a system has perhaps been on the quantitative outcomes rather than the qualitative for children. Children and parents need us to listen more as a system. Not just see the data, not just see the numbers, but listen. Alongside this, it's also fascinating to listen to other views from other sources in our communities and the implications for how our organisations move forward. From Ipsos that half of the population accept that homeschooling and online learning may be around for the long term. People see this as almost inevitable. So how do we respond to that? How do we have that dialogue with communities and parents and pupils around how that really works? From education and employers, young people report only limited career support from their schools and colleges. This is a real challenge, particularly, as I said, at a time when the jobs market is evolving. And to talk about that, from Future Advocacy, that 8 million jobs in Great Britain are at risk of automation by early 2030s, with most affected in retail, manufacturing and transport. These are strategic issues that may easily be lost if we're just looking at the weather. That's not to say we shouldn't stay attuned to the weather and how government agencies see the world. That's why Her Majesty's Chief Inspector also joins us today. But I think we can all hope that Amanda will bring us news of calmer, more clement times, quieter skies, so that we can also go and listen to the market and tend to our soil. I'm also pleased that today we will hear from Jo Corson, CEO of the Institute for Customer Services, on how we can be even better at listening and connecting at a local level in order to keep our purpose front of mind. So, purpose-driven organisations are connected, listening organisations. Today is a good chance to consider purpose and intent, with the help of people like Mark, Jo, Raj Tulsiani and others. Consider what it is you truly want to achieve in the next year, those small but potent priorities that will help you shape the next phase. I now want to say a little bit about our people in terms of staff and teams. If we are to inspire and motivate our teams, we need to have both the space and energy to ignite that collective sense of purpose for the next stage, rather than letting reactivity take centre stage. However, a few weeks into a new year, much concern is that reactivity phase fatigue is setting in. As I've said, that goes for you as CEOs, as well as your central teams, heads and staff. I want to be frank here. I don't think enough CEOs or central team members have had enough of a break this summer. In a recent article for the Financial Times, Camilla Cavendish wrote, "Many executives who powered through the pandemic with no Easter break are approaching an uncertain autumn insufficiently revived. The ability to rest is an advantage in the workplace, and many of us are very bad at it." I also think in some cases, due to the sheer uncertainty and the lack of capacity surrounding leaders, there's been little choice. One of the things I'm most proud of that we have done at Forum Strategy this year is to establish the Trust Leaders Wellbeing Group to champion the importance of wellbeing, rest and good practice throughout the pandemic. Schools Advisory Service and CEOs such as Nick Blackburn and Gary Wilkie and many, many more have really contributed to our thinking with case studies and so on. I think and I hope that many of our members modelled a calmer summer for themselves and their staff. It was not by chance that our last session of the last academic year was called Wellbeing the CEO, open to all our members. You needed a break. However, this year is going to be a test. As I mentioned last year, we are approaching a demographic bulge. Many of our CEOs and senior leaders are just a few years away from retirement now. I am hearing more CEOs and more head teachers, particularly those heads who have been isolated without the support of a Trust Central team through the crisis, talking about bringing forward retirement or moving on to other things. Indeed, the Education Institute in Scotland has warned that head teachers and senior leaders have said they face unsustainable and excessive workloads, and the pandemic and changing policy around school operations has taken its toll. I think that's replicated everywhere. My worry is often for heads who have not been within a trust and have not had access to the central teams. But in trusts, my worry tends to be with the CEOs and the chief operating officers who have been the conduits of huge amounts of information and have taken a great weight of responsibility. In trusts, executives have borne the brunt. If we look back to the last big crisis, the financial crisis, CEO turnover across the economy hit a peak. We risk that again. The problem is we're going to struggle to replace those of you that go. The recent National Governance Association survey found that nearly 2 in 5 governors and trustees surveyed agree that it's difficult to attract good candidates for senior executive leadership posts, such as head teacher, executive head, or CEO. That's only going to get more challenging. We know that following the demographic bulge going into retirement, those in their mid to late 50s, there is a demographic dip of experienced leaders in their late 40s and early 50s. That sense of wanting to bring forward retirement is understandable. It is a major risk for our education sector and for school communities that have been through so much upheaval in the last 6 months. So what do we do right now to mitigate that risk? Well, I think there are 3 things. An end to the lack of stability and uncertainty around government guidance. We need careful dialogue and partnership with the profession in making changes and in planning new guidance, and giving leaders a lead-in time to engage and respond. This culture of guidance landing in inboxes at all hours, including those stories of 6 p.m. on a Friday evening, cannot carry on. I cannot emphasize the toll that is taking. We need to avoid to return to a high-stakes accountability system, taking this opportunity to rethink how we ensure our trusts and schools are subject to much more intelligent accountability, purer accountability. This is accountability to our communities, to parents, to pupils, and yes, to staff. Really enabling them to feed into our improvement and development over time. And less of that intense accountability created by the weather, the targets and the changing goalposts of government and government officials every 2 or 3 years. This is our greatest chance in a generation to move to a more sophisticated approach to accountability. And you can begin to create that now with your boards in your trusts. There's currently a vacuum around top-down accountability, and replacing that with that intelligent, community-focused accountability will help us to redress the balance and make the good case to government to redress the balance as we go into the future. And then finally, we need boards that understand that they need to support and protect their leaders, investing in coaching and development where necessary, giving them the time to plan and be strategic, and also helping those that haven't got those central teams to develop them, to make sure that they have the right expertise and the right capacity on board. I'm also under no doubt that the role in facilitating networks and peer-to-peer support that Forum Strategy plays is going to be even more essential in the year ahead. We will play our part and continue to make a difference. But it's clear, as Harvard Business Review said this summer, to help your organisation build resilience, you need to build your own first. Even small steps will help. Leaders recognising the icebergs ahead, but also helping them to find the hidden opportunities. And there are opportunities right now to recreate organisations that are even more attractive to the best staff and that are even more geared to prepare our children and young people for a changing world. And that's the point, colleagues. It's about surviving right now, but it's also about how do we thrive and adapt to create something even better. And as we re-engage with those purposeful strategic priorities, we must also be disciplined in approaching these with focus, rather than exacerbating the demands and pressures on ourselves as leaders. In her article for Forum Strategy earlier this year, Rachel Gax highlighted the importance of having a small number of clear goals. For CEOs right now, it is all too easy to be pulled in so many different directions and to have far too many priorities. According to Mark Hello, founder of the CEO Project, the top CEOs spend a lot of their time on a few things. They spend more than half their time on what they determine as their 3 top priorities. Contrast this with an average CEO who will spend time on a whole myriad of priorities and never gets to many of them. This ability to focus is one of the key things that sets top CEOs apart. They will focus on a small number of priorities at one time. They will not give up and they will not get distracted. That's been easier said than done in the last few months, but it must be our aspiration. And in terms of staff, beyond our executive leaders and heads, we now need to consider both the shorter and longer term implications on our teams and on our colleagues. As I've said, many trusts are now focusing on those purposeful initiatives around staff wellbeing. I think in the short term, we are not going to lose staff as the economy battles to recover. There are less jobs, less competition for talent, and attitudes are changing, with particularly younger workers intending to stay in post for longer. The sector has a stay of execution in terms of the recruitment crisis. But we need to ensure morally and organisationally that our staff are healthy and supported. The next few months are going to be challenging. Staff may have partners impacted by job losses. They may have health issues themselves or have lost loved ones to the pandemic or the collateral of the pandemic. We need to be purposeful, but also caring, people-orientated organisations. Into the longer term, I think as executive leaders, we need to recognise that the world of work has changed for good, and we need to recalibrate if we're going to hold on to the most talented people. Flexibility in the way we work, how we work, and where we work is now becoming an expectation. Just as COVID accelerated those pre-existing trends around the shift to technology and the delivery of online learning, it has also shifted those trends around employee expectations. As Korn Ferry Institute wrote in the summer, working from home is no longer a trend, but a business necessity. The article suggests that more full-time employees require the flexibility of remote working. For employers, this can lead to increased engagement and productivity and help with recruitment and retention. But working remotely does present significant challenges for organisations and employees, and I think that's a particular issue that we have to wrestle with in education. I know from leading my own organisation that flexible remote working is essential for the recruitment and retention of the most talented staff in today's economy, and also for ensuring that they are at their most creative and collaborative. The pandemic has changed people's measures of success. They don't want to be tied to their workplaces as long as they were. They recognise how much they value flexibility, they value family time, and they value the ability to do a good job without it compromising their health or relationships. Now, I know this is going to be challenging for the education sector, but we cannot simply ignore it. If we're going to be truly people-centred organisations, there is an organisational need to attract the best people and to attract the best employees and retain them. We have to keep up in a world where employee expectations have shifted dramatically. One of the most important things we can do as leaders, like with our pupils and communities, is to listen carefully and connect with and stay in tune with our staff, their hopes, their expectations, and their concerns. I think one of the most valuable things that trusts have done throughout the pandemic is to listen to their staff. In his excellent book, Julian Richer of Richer Sounds, one of the country's most celebrated entrepreneurs, says this: focusing on people requires listening to what they are telling you, paying attention to individuals and finding out what messages you are sending them. It needs action. I cannot tell you it will be easy, but I can tell you it will work. But this is not a universal trait or a standard approach in education yet. The NGA's annual survey concerningly found that 26% of governors' trustees reported that they had not used any formal methods of engaging with staff within their school or trust in the past 12 months. Those that did engage reported monitoring results of staff surveys, 70%, or holding staff consultation, just over a quarter. So that's a lot of trusts that aren't surveying or temperature checking their staff in a formal way. We must not forget to keep listening and engaging, and I think to lead the action Julian Richard describes, yes, it can be introduced through the culture of the organisation, but it needs to be reinforced by those opportunities, formally as well as informally, to feed in, to provide feedback on what it's like to work in our organisations, what's great about them, what needs to improve, and actually also understanding from staff how the organisation itself can improve. People elevate purpose, and purpose elevates people. We cannot leave our people behind. Leading in not so splendid isolation, it is they that will take us forward in the months and years ahead. So there is much to think about, colleagues, and much of it begins with reconnecting with people and purpose. The key thing for CEOs in the year ahead is to make the time to connect and to listen, to prioritise, and to look after yourselves and your teams. It's unrealistic to say that the reactivity will stop, but aside from the reactivity, we have to make the best use of our time and our energy. How you use that time and energy will define the future of a generation. So do not lose sight of why you are here. Do not lose sight of those around you. When it comes down to it, we need you more than ever. We need your purpose more than ever. We need your people more than ever. Purpose and people, people and purpose. It begins with you. In the words of Dostoevsky, the mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. Colleagues, we need you to not only help our people survive the collateral of this current situation and to manage it, but to thrive, both now and in preparation for a better future. We need you to lead organisations in a sector that enables us all, your people, to connect and reconnect with their innate purpose. That will sustain us. That will elevate us. That will give us the hope for a better, brighter future, especially for the next generation. Thank you. Thank you for your partnership, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of our conference today.